Good evening and welcome to another edition of A Conversation with John Conenna. Tonight, we are honored to have on as a repeat guest, because we don't get too many of these. Kerry Sayers Doucet is back here on the show, and it's great to see Kerry again and really honored to have you back on. Kerry is, of course, now doing, she is the president and founder of Forever Yours Legacy Videos. And of course, just recently, from about 2015, you could correct me on the dates, Kerry, to 2022, the former host of Decades Through the Decades. So what's going on, young lady? Before we talk about legacy videos, what's going on right now in your life and how are things going?
First of all, you remind me why I like you so much, because you called me young lady, and that doesn't happen very often, John. So, still one of my favorite people. Thank you.
Thank you, honey. Thank you.
Um, no, I think, as we discussed in our last chat, that Decades was a great post sports broadcasting, kind of the second act. So I guess you could call this the third act, but Decades pretty much came through the decades, pretty much came to an end. I don't want to say pre-pandemic. We were done shooting Through the Decades, which was a history show that was co-hosted by myself and Ellie Pai Hong and Bill Curtis, the original anchorman. That was a fantastic opportunity to do something and, expand my horizons beyond sports and the 20 years or so that I spent in sports. It was really a great experience and perfect for a mom with young kids, which I had at that time. I was 3 months pregnant with my son when I took that job. And it was really an incredible opportunity and just a great way to, again, expand my horizons beyond the world of sports. And right about when the pandemic hit, our goal originally was to shoot 3 full years of programming. So 365 days of programming to sell into syndication. And it was for a while. We did a few fixes from home when we were all working from home during the pandemic. Each one of us hosts, as hosts, had, a little closet recording booth, which still exists in my home. It's like hard for me to fit in this closet because
you would do some of these from the home, right?
So not the actual filming, like on camera filming, but some of the voiceover fixes we were doing. Yes, in fact, I still do voiceovers from my little closet upstairs. So, hey, if anyone's interested.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so that was, it was good, but it was coming to an end. And what happened was, under the Weigel Broadcasting umbrella, which Through the Decades and the Decades TV network was they also purchased a network called Start TV. And it essentially was, it's a network that was tailored towards women. There were 17 or 18 procedural dramas and all had a strong female lead. And instead of doing, say, an anchor show like, say, like Through the Decades was for Decades TV, where the programming centered around the news of the day and could be a little bit of an offshoot from whatever Through the Decades featured that day. Start TV, we ended up doing these little snippets, these little vignettes, a 30-second and a full minute of women who, in the beginning, whose lives or careers paralleled those of some of the women in some of the shows. And I'm talking about shows like The Ghost Whisperer, oh gosh, there were so many, I can't even come up with them, but they were mostly they were police, they were lawyers, they were chiefs of staff, so you're talking whether it's politics, whether it was first responders, lawyers. So there were all sorts of procedural dramas. And after a while, it was just hard to find women whose careers paralleled those of the women in the shows. So then it turned into women who accomplished something in their field for the first time. And those were some incredible, inspiring stories. Those turned into long form stories. So I became more of a producer, the team that was on Decades.
I saw that. I noticed. Yeah.
Yeah. So many of us just shifted to Start TV, and it was very personal for many of us. Again, an all female team. We were doing many of these stories during the pandemic virtually. And so we pivoted a bit from having women in the studio and doing these great shoots and being able to meet them in person and then we had a few members of our team who traveled to New York and LA. So we really were able to expand our reach to women who weren't just in the Chicago area. And then the pandemic hit, and we started to do a lot of virtual stories. And we did a story or a series focused mostly around the idea of this she session of women who took major steps back, had to either leave their job or long time career to either take care of children and homeschool, to
Right.
take care of ill parents, or they lost their job because jobs were being cut during the pandemic. And it was just such a personal project for so many of us. I mean, there were women who were crying when I was interviewing them, and frankly,
So this became really a very emotional too. I mean,
very, and it was for me too. I was in the same boat. I had my kids from home. Fortunately, my parents were healthy, but it was a tough time. So
sure.
we all were feeling it and we all could relate. I was one of the few on the staff at Start who had young children at the time. So I was living it right along with these women. And, during that time, when we started shifting from short form, these 30-second and minute stories, to
Mhm.
these longer form stories, again, these women who had accomplished something pretty incredible in their career, that were some of the first to do what they were doing in their professional field. And it was during that time that some of these women were sharing stories, not just of the loss of identity and loss of jobs and loss of, independence. They lost their network, their support
Sure.
network, but they were talking about real loss, like loss of life. They stayed away from their loved ones and perhaps someone passed anyways. And at the same time, I'm reading, in the newspaper, these stories of people who had lost family members. And there was so much more to say. And there was so much I still had to say to them. And oh, by the way, I heard stories about my mom, dad, aunt at their funeral that I had never heard before, or that I knew, but I didn't really know the full extent of the story. And it just kind of planted a seed in my head. Like, these stories are important. I mean, the life experiences, the life history, the advice they have to pass on, just all of those things combined, they're worth saving, they're worth preserving and passing on for future generations. And that was the start of my new venture. So do we call this, I don't know what version of this is. This is my third.
Third,
It's not
okay,
even,
well,
this is my third act.
chapter three, Sayers chapter three. Yeah,
Okay, we'll
no,
call
but
it
Kerry,
Sayers Chapter 3. I
just
like that.
before we close it off on the decades thing. So now, where is what you were doing on decades? Because was October of 22 where I think
That's
you
right.
make the decision. Where is decades now, and what you were doing? Is decades? Is Curtis still involved, or?
So I should probably know this. That's a great question. Decades Network doesn't really exist anymore. They renamed it and did a bit of a pivot on the type of shows they're airing. I still get people saying, "Hey, I saw Decades randomly on blank station." It used to be in 65% of markets or so throughout the US, and I think people really miss it. I mean, really, it was just a
Sure.
good snippet of history and a day in the life, and um, what was happening in that day, and politics and music and pop culture. And yeah, I think it's a show that's missed, but you may see it floating around here and there, but it's technically, there is no more Decades TV anymore.
Gotcha.
They rebranded it, and they've moved on. Um, and I wish I could tell you what's happening with Bill right now. I'd love to reach out to him. In fact, I really need to, but it was a great experience. And really, if I could just speak honestly about it, I don't know that any of us expected that we would be shooting it 5 years in. I think we thought, with the schedule they had and the number of shows we were filming in the first 2 and 3 years, that,
Sure.
we might all be out of a job in 3 or 4 years. And here we were. I was there for 7. Of course, the
So,
last few were pretty much strictly Start TV, but again, it was a
what a
great
great,
experience
I
and a
mean,
great
what a
show.
great run you had with this. But do you really, I know before I went back to decades, you start to get the idea of this Forever Yours legacy videos as you were doing this, right?
That's right.
So, and I
So
really, I want you to go back to that because that was so interesting the way you opened that up.
yeah, and I mean, John, I think what happens is, I mean, look, I think if I, again, just speaking honestly here, I would never have really considered myself an entrepreneur. But for really the first time in my life, I was so sure of this idea and this thought that there's something really, there's a service out there, and I'm certainly not the first to do it. I decided I wasn't going to do any research on it before I built my website and came up with the vision of what I wanted. And it really grew exponentially over the 6 or 7 months that I just spent
Sure.
building it. It started off as I'll do 2 or 3 things, and now I think I offer 6 or 7 packages, and I'm still coming up with more now that I've launched. But what working with Start and Start TV and doing those interviews with those women set up for me was a process to do it in which there's no narration. I am no part of it. There's no voiceover. I'm not featured in it because really it's an individual story. It's a family story. It's your corporate journey or your journey to entrepreneurship. And we can get into more of what all these,
Sure.
areas are. But I think what it gave me was it planted the seed. I'm doing this now. I'm not a single part of it. You conduct the interviews in a way that you allow them to be self-narrated and to have transitions. The hardest part was figuring out, how do I cover these stories, the life stories, and getting the stories out of, these clients that I potentially will have isn't the hard part, because I think you've learned the older we get, the more we love talking about our days growing up in school
Without a
and our,
doubt.
right? The good
Right,
old
without a
days.
doubt.
Take a walk down memory lane. It's, how do I get the assets to support it? How do I get the photos? How do I get the videos? But the seeds were planted during the pandemic. On my website, I tell the story. There were 2 or 3 things that really led me to launching this type of business. And the first and foremost was during the pandemic and doing these very emotional, personal stories. And again, it was for Women's History Month, and it was these women that were dealing with all sorts of change and loss in their life. And so that was the first and foremost. Around the same time, I guess, what's my son say? So it was probably just prior to the pandemic that also bled right into this. There was a woman at school, as a mom of a student who was in class with my son, and they were in pre-K 4. And I didn't get to know her right away, but it was clear she was going through cancer treatment. And
Right.
once I got to know her, she had late stage cancer and was going through trials, and none of them worked. And I just felt this need to say to her, look, I know you're not feeling well and you're not doing well. I would love to just, you know, film you and ask you some questions and put a story together for, she had a 4-year-old and a husband, kind of a love letter, like, what can you leave behind for them? And around the time we talked more about it and agreed to it, she ended up going in the hospital and never came home. She ended up passing away.
And
And so
Kerry, not to interrupt you, was this like one of your first things where you said, I'm going to try this with this lady?
it was still when it was just the very beginning, like a whisper in my head, like, could I do this? Is this something that could have legs? Would people appreciate this? So it was one of those things. It was more of a personal, like, friendship thing. It was just like beginning to form this idea at that time. But again, something that when she passed, I felt like I missed an opportunity. And not that I failed her, but that had I even asked her a few months earlier that maybe, and she had said, well, my sister-in-law's been taping things on her phone. And I said, have her give me those clips. I'll edit it together for you. And it didn't come to that. And that's okay. I mean, she had far more important things to worry about at that time, fighting the battle of her life. But again, just this all was happening at the same time, pretty much, that was leading me and, giving me more conviction that this was something that I wanted to try to build towards.
Wow. And again, is there that was the of course that certain situation, but what are you so you're looking for, like I noticed when I did the little bit of research again, you talk about this one grandmother, I think her name is Leona,
Yes.
in the little bit of research that I did, and talking about when she was young and the grandkids bought her the present. And matter of fact, I was talking to my wife. It's like, I would love to do this for my 93-year-old mother-in-law.
Right.
I go,
So, yeah, go ahead, John.
no, so I mean, you hit on different types of situations, correct?
Yes, and so that client that you're discussing, it was a friend of mine in the city, and she was like, "We've got to hire you. My cousins and I want to go in on this gift for our parents." And this was probably say November. She's like, "Can you get it done by Christmas? This is what our Christmas gathering is." She gave me the date. She said, "I'd love for all of us to be able to watch it together." And so we did. I hired a videographer and we went out to Indiana. She's 98 years old. And
98. Wow.
she had been married, John, for 76 years.
Holy cow.
76 years.
Wow.
That doesn't
That's
happen
unheard
anymore.
of. Now that's unheard
Yeah.
of.
No, and sadly, I think her husband, excuse me, Mitch died just before their 77th, but she had a lot of amazing memories just, from living close to grandparents and the way they did the laundry to, she had a couple younger siblings, and she would come home from school and feed them lunch, and, and her husband went off and fought. They got married because he was going off to fight in World War II. And
Mhm.
and the things that he saw and experienced, and then just in general, their life together, and even better. And this is where I think these stories really come alive. Her granddaughter had video of the two of them dancing together at their 75th wedding anniversary party,
Oh, wow.
and she had a
Wow.
clip of this granddaughter, this friend of mine, had a clip of her grandfather saying a prayer at dinner that essentially said, God, thank you for bringing us together. I wish I could be here forever. And I mean,
Wow.
those are the kind of things that just get you right here, right?
Sure.
And there hasn't
Sure.
been a story I've done that hasn't brought me to tears multiple times, either during the interview or during the process of putting it together, when it hits me that these people are entrusting me to tell their family stories that are so, emotional. And sometimes there's heartbreak in these stories,
Sure.
death
We
and
got the
loss.
peaks and valleys in these stories, for sure.
Yes, I just did my first couple and interviewed my first couple, and it was a virtual interview. They were out in Texas, and they shared the story with me of, they had a daughter who ended up having a heart condition, and it's a condition that can be repaired in utero these days. And the baby died at 6 months old. And, there isn't a parent that can't relate to the heaviness of that loss.
Okay.
Um, and so again, I am entrusted with family secrets. Leona, my 98-year-old, revealed a couple of secrets in her interview with her granddaughter in the other room, saying, "Grandma, I heard that."
Right.
And
But Carrie, and again, I think it comes back to you too, being the person that's doing this interview with this legacy. The person or these people feel comfortable even with your personality, because if you go in there with this hardcore, correct me if I'm wrong. If you go in there with the hardcore attitude, oh yeah, okay, tell me a little bit about your life over here. You're not going to get this warmth. And talk about the 76 years of this Leona, no pun intended, but she could talk about the decades of her
that's
life.
right. She
Yeah.
could. That's a great point.
Yeah, the decades, of her life. But are you how many of these so far have you done? And because it looks like a lot of them have really touched your heart here.
They really have. I think I'm on 5, and I have still, wait, as we call it, one in the can. There's a 6th. I'm just waiting for photos from the family. And really, it takes time. When I was putting together my website materials and working with time frames, I think the one thing that people see is, we tried to do a pretty thorough job on my website of explaining, the type of package and what you're getting from start to finish. Like, here's what happens when you book, this is what happens. And then we do a pre-Zoom call. We have you fill out a questionnaire. Then we do a Zoom call a few weeks out from your interview.
Okay.
And when we're there, like, we arrive, look for spots in your home if that's where we're meeting, to set up our cameras. And then I spend some time talking to the client once again and just, getting comfortable. And then we spend, an hour or two in the interview, just talking about anything and everything we need, with some stop downs if needed. And then if we need to scan some photos, or we always, try to get a little, what we call B-roll, extra video of the client. and then we break our equipment down and we head off. But then the real work begins because producing these pieces, I get them transcribed, and really it takes time to put a 10, 15, 20-minute video together. And if you're doing a couple, or I have a family business or a family tree video that's
Sure,
designed to bring, like for family tree, generations of family together. For family business, you're obviously talking to more than just one person. It
sure.
takes time to weave those stories together. And basically, you're putting a blueprint together for your editor. And then, we're getting, again, photos and videos from our clients that we have to add that support what they're saying. We use maps and graphics and music. And what you end up with is this beautiful story of your loved one's life or your life. And it takes time, and really there's a real investment in it, as there should be,
Sure.
to give this priceless gift. Because really, when I think about what we all went through during the pandemic, and this isn't a marketing line when I say a priceless gift, if we didn't learn the importance then of how, what family means to us, and when we had that opportunity taken away where we couldn't see our family as often and we couldn't travel to locations, and that time you can't get back. So appreciating, especially at our age, what can you get your parents anymore? Like, what can I get my parents? What could they get
Right.
their parents? You run out of things to get that
Yeah,
have true meaning. You go on a trip, you spend time together, or you can preserve their memories.
preserve the
And
memories.
to me, and really the feedback I've gotten has been phenomenal. This is a passion project for me. Obviously, I'm charging money for it. I'm not doing it
Oh,
for
yeah, you're
free.
not gonna work for free. Yeah,
But I also feel so passionate about
right.
it. It's like I'm telling a family member's story every time. And I can't stop watching it. To me, there's something incredible in the opportunity for this couple that I did in Texas, talking about the legacy of their children and these three outstanding individuals and
Sure.
their spouses and their 9 grandchildren. That's their legacy, that they've left three pretty great human beings on this earth that have done super well, and to tell their story and to say that that's their legacy. That's the point. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want people to remember you by? And then, a client whose clip I released today, I have other clients who have this incredible family history. This client of mine, Myra, was born in the Dominican Republic. Her father was a diplomat. Her great grandfather's uncles were generals in the army and helped declare independence for the Dominican Republic. And she worked for the president of the DR when she was in her 20s.
Wow.
I talked to this woman for 2.5 hours. There was so much of her story to tell. And so, again, everyone has a story, and it's special to them, to their family, to the family they're leaving behind, to future generations, to their grandchildren who, when they turn 15 or 20 or have families of their own, have that memory and that really precious gift to pass along that can be forever yours. And that's where the name came from, is leave something behind that can be
Yeah.
forever yours, that can be forever yours for your family, that you leave behind.
And thank you for breaking down the title just now. I was just gonna ask you, you stole my question. Where did you get Forever Yours? Like,
That's it.
but I
I
have
mean,
to, Karen,
yeah.
do you find, like, right when you go to the venue, the person's house, the business, do you find the memories right in front of you, just in pictures and things that are around, knickknacks around the office or the home? Do you already start to see, I know what this person is all about?
Yeah, you really do. And Leona was a prime example. Again, she was my first client, and I have a funny story to tell you about her 99th birthday, and I don't think her family would mind me sharing. But when we got to Leona's house, we were surrounded by memories. We were surrounded by the 75th wedding anniversary invitation and pictures of her family through the years, and pictures of her and her husband, her deceased husband, Mitch. And we caught her in her element. She had taken up a hobby called diamond art, and her granddaughter made sure she had it set up so that she was doing it. It's kind of like little rhinestones that you place certain colors on, you know, a specific number. And she was singing the song that she and her husband used
Oh,
to
wow.
sing to each other on New Year's Eve, and Let Me Call You Sweetheart.
Oh, wow.
And I got so many responses. That's what my parents used to sing to me when I was little. Like, so, but yeah, we walked in and we were surrounded by history. And she was 98, so that makes sense, right? But you know, we did get so much video there, and she told us about the chair her husband sat in all the time, and she still had his jacket or his sweater on a hook on a coat rack behind the chair, and talked about the Cubs jacket he had in the garage, and she's left it all there, and we filmed all of that. We got a picture of him sitting in that chair, and her hugging him in that chair. I mean, so it's all about capturing moments in history, capturing these special moments, and sometimes they're not all butterflies and rainbows,
Right.
but that's all part of it, right?
Sure, sure. I mean, no, but just fantastic because a lot of times again, you bring up my mother-in-law, you go there and you see the memories of my father-in-law. You see like some of the things that they did, of course, the pictures on the wall. So you're giving me a little bit of goosebumps because even when I go
Right.
back to my parents' home in Norwich, that my sister still lives in, I see still all these things that my mom and left that behind. I would have loved for them to have had something like this, while they were alive. But yes, I love the fact that you said, what else can you buy? I mean, I think my mother-in-law told my wife a couple of weeks ago, she goes, if he gives me one more Nordstrom's card, I'm going to throw it in his face.
Hey, you can throw those Nordstrom cards
Okay,
my way.
okay.
Take those.
Yeah,
But
I
you're
mean,
right. Like, what do you, I mean, honest to God, when I remember my grandfather hit 90, and we would get him peanuts, like a big box of peanuts, and my mom would buy him underwear. Like, are you serious, mom? Like, really? This is
I
what we're
know.
buying, Grandpa?
Right. I mean, but again, like you said, what else can you, get them at their age, Or I remember my dad, when he was alive, he would say to me, why are you spending money? People save your money,
Right.
save your money, why are you spending it on me? But I loved your line here tonight, especially during COVID. Um, my parents always used to say to me, John, you're already living for next year. This is, of course, pre-COVID. And, live day by
Live
day.
today.
Yeah, day by day. And this is so important what you said.
And John, you bring up a really good point, and it leads me to another one. The day that I launched, a friend of mine, and so I'll call her out, that the day that I launched, a friend of mine who's since moved from the Chicagoland area sent me a post, and it said, the mistake we all make is believing we have time. And that right there is so powerful. It's basically the premise, it's the basis upon which I built this business. And
Wow.
I have a story to share about that. I mean,
Please.
we think we all have time, even my husband and I. My husband's 56, and I can't tell you how many members of his graduating high school class have died in the last 5 years. And we're in our 50s. So it's that premise. When things are going well and your parents are healthy, we know things can turn at the drop of at the drop of done. We know things can turn like
Sure.
immediately, and it did for me. This is also part of my about me, my part of another one of my whys. Why did I build this business? My parents, relatively healthy. My dad had never really been ill a day in his life. I think he had hernia surgery maybe in his 70s.
Right.
And he had a couple bouts of vertigo that he was not well when that happened. But I mean, within a day of getting medication, he was perfectly fine again. Well, spring break last year, so late March, I was with my family on spring break, and I got a frantic call from my mom that my dad had climbed up the attic ladder to get a smaller golf bag for their trip to Florida that they were about to embark on in 2 days.
Sure.
And he fell off the ladder
Oh,
and fractured his skull. He had a 5-inch fracture of his skull. And he suffered a traumatic brain injury. He seemed to recover a little. He was in a hospital for 2 months and rehab for another 5 weeks. He came home and proceeded to fall 3 more times. And
oh,
now he's been in full-time care since the end of July of last year. So here's a man who really never saw. Now he was 84 when he fell. He's now 85. So you know that it could happen at any time.
Anytime.
But no one would have ever expected that. Um, so in the midst of all this, you're building a business. The first thing I was going to do was interview my parents and use them as guinea pigs.
Sure.
My dad had some amazing stories
Oh,
and
I
also
can imagine.
some horrible story. He had a very tragic story. And I sat down. Here's another one. I sat down years ago to try to write a few pages of my dad's history for my kids' memory books. My sister-in-law had done it. So I thought, this is a great idea. We sat down, and within the first half hour, I'm taking notes, right? I'm not even filming it. He told me the story that I already knew most of, that one of his brothers had died when he was young, and it was a car accident. It was awful. What I didn't know is that my dad lived on a farm. He grew up on a farm. Is that back then they sometimes laid their deceased out in their homes. So here's my dad, about the age of my children, looking over the balcony down on his dead brother's body. And I burst into tears.
Sure.
My dad burst into tears. It took us both a while to recover. I had young kids at the time, set the pen down, never came back to it. My dad has some crazy, amazing stories about growing up on a farm. They didn't even have plumbing inside. They didn't even have an indoor toilet for a while.
They couldn't Google anything. Yeah. You know.
And the first time he fired a shotgun on the farm, and how he, the kickback and the bruise on the shoulder, and all these stories that I remember. He overcame poliomeningitis as a child. I remember him saying that my grandfather used to take him in the barn and work his legs out so he didn't need braces for his whole life. I mean, my dad overcame some pretty significant adversity
Sure.
and some tragedies in his younger years. And again, I missed my chance to capture that. He can't speak anymore. He's wheelchair bound. He can't move his right side. So I guess my point being, I experienced firsthand how quickly things can turn.
Sure.
You just never know.
You
And
never-
so it is extra personal to me to preserve these memories.
This is fantastic. I mean, and again, my best to your father, but I have to
Thanks.
tell you, your father, of course, is from my dad was 89 when he passed in 2015. But I have to tell you, the years of your father, my in-laws, your in-laws, whatever, those
Yeah.
are the years of sacrifice that this
Yeah.
generation could have never imagined.
No,
You
you're
know,
right.
so I mean, I would have loved to have heard those stories myself, from my parents, let alone your dad. And again, truly the best. But you have really done something here that I think is maybe been that thing that was always burning in you. That thing that, I mean, you were so popular here in town doing the sports, the score. You're a great reporter. You were always, and I saw it when you were reporting as a young lady here in town. Now, it was very easy to talk to you. And then the thing with decades. So this really, I mean, this is like almost like a second nature for you. I mean, do you feel like it's going really well for you?
It's funny that you say that, because every time I would tell people about this idea, the more that the idea grew, and I spent more time, invested more time into what I really wanted it to be. When I talk about it, I get goosebumps. I get choked up sometimes because I'm so passionate about it. And do you ever just feel like you are where you're supposed to be? I think everything I've gone through to this point, and this isn't the only thing I do. As you know, I host charity events
Yes.
and help with the fundraising, and that's also
MC.
very near and dear to my philanthropic side of me.
Sure.
But this is something so different, because I mean, and I said, wow, do I really want to be this busy? And the answer is absolutely, because I'm a storyteller at heart, whether I'm telling my own story, my family's story, or other people's stories. Those are so important and deserve to be preserved. And I remember how painful it was with Start TV to do an hour-long interview and have to narrow it down to a minute and then a 30-second piece. We left more than half of their life story on the cutting room floor. Well, I don't have to do that anymore. I can do a 10, 15, 20-minute piece and
Right.
really just capture the essence of a life. And one of my recent clients, I just sent not a rough cut. And he said, you really captured the essence of our life and who we are. And that's what this is, what this is all about.
You're
That's
not
exactly
rushing,
what I want to do.
you're not rushing the client. You're not rushing the
No,
client.
and I don't have to make a decision to plug it into a 5-minute box. I really can spend time, and look, whose story can be told in 5 minutes? I
No,
mean, you can't. Even Leona. Now, Leona at 98, she had this long list, like literally this list of jobs she wrote down. And I'm not kidding. She had 15 jobs if she had one in her life. She had to write the list down and read it
she,
off to them. So, her story was maybe 13 minutes. Well, my other client, Myra, we did an extended version for her. It was 25 minutes because her family history and her ancestor, they had so much history in it's in their
sure.
family. Her ancestors are in history books. That there was just so much there. So when it comes to like setting a time frame, I try not to. We do dictate like this package has a certain, a time
Sure,
frame that's
sure.
affiliated with the video, but really it's only because sometimes not every detail of the interview gets put into the final story. What ultimately makes it, again, are not just the highlights, but the truly important stuff. Even
Sure.
if they don't have any pictures or video to support it, if it's a significant part of their life, then it's in the story. And it really, at that point, that kind of dictates the length. It always ends up feeling right to me. Like this is where it belongs. So,
So like you're saying, it flows for you. You know when it's flowing good. Like even
yes.
an interview, it's flow. Yeah, it flow. Like tonight, I had mentioned to some of my friends that I was going to interview you again. He goes, "Well, you're not going." I go, I'm not going to talk about Comcast Sports. Then I'm not going to talk about the sports. You already did that." Because then they go to me, "Well, what are you going to talk about? Because you're all about sports." I go, "Don't worry about it. I'm not worried about it. I want to talk about what she's doing now.
Well, I appreciate that. There's still obviously plenty to talk about in the sporting world, but I
Oh, for
again,
sure.
thank
Well,
you
we're
for
going to
your.
end it with a couple of things about the sporting world.
All
But
right.
I have to tell you, and again, we're kind of coming to a close here, but we are visiting with Kerry Sayers Doucet, and she has launched her Forever Yours Legacy videos. And of course, I'm going to have Kerry at the end talk about the website where you can
Yeah.
go to see this great work that she's doing and this go-getter that has always been. Has it been easy to market this, Kerry?
So it's funny you asked that because I do feel like my head was very buried in the sand building the website and the idea. I did a window and door commercial a couple months ago, and the owner of the company, Next Door and Windows, Justin Bartley, has been an unexpected, just amazing, incredible source of knowledge and advice. Just reaching out as I've sent him various iterations of the website with ideas for marketing. So that is probably the least of my strong points now that I've launched. And really, I had, some friends who are small business owners encouraging me to launch without a website, just from a YouTube channel. And it was really important to me to truly build, this is who I am, this is what we do, and to have it all the pieces together of this is what I'm going to offer. This is the scope, and to not just soft launch. So I just pretty much launched through my main social media pages. I'm lucky enough that I have people who have followed me for a while, which is amazing, and
Right?
have been incredibly kind and supportive. I think this is really the type of thing that's ultimately going to become word of mouth, because even in Elmhurst, where we live, it's gone around, and I have people saying,
Sure.
"Hey, I really want to get my family together," or "I really need to do this for my mom," or "My parents have passed, even at my age. I really want to get this history down so that my children have it and another generation doesn't go without it." So the response has been good. I think too, with any new business, you always learn what people might want in addition to what you're offering or instead
Sure.
of. And one of the things I've gotten is, are you like Legacy Box? Do you digitize things? And that really was something we were trying not to do. And I'm considering seeing if I can find someone to do that, because really, even at my mother and father's home, my mom was a picture taker. but she never had the time after a certain stage, because I know it, I'm living it, where you just don't have that kind of time to put albums together. So much easier now with these, you know, the
Yeah,
digital, the
yeah, with
Shutterfly
our friend
and
here, yeah.
things like that. That's right. But that's something that people, my mom still has freaking VHS tapes sitting
Oh
around.
my
And here she
God.
goes, this was the Oprah show from 1985. Like, what
Yeah.
did you think?
Michael Jordan was on, right? Exactly.
I wish Michael Jordan was on. It's nothing like that, but
Yeah.
just to, you know, some people want want that stuff digitized. And I'm certainly not going to become a legacy box, because let's just throw it out there. Everyone knows that
Sure.
legacy box is, you know, the main competitor. They're the place to go. So, you know, you start to learn what people might want in addition to. And so I think it's literally been a week and a half, and it's been a great start. I appreciate you inviting me on. I've had a
Oh
couple
yeah,
other
I'd like
people.
to get this on your website. We're gonna put this, of course, on the YouTube, like we
Yes.
did the other one, and to get this going. Um, okay, so just because I want to end it with something else, but can you name the website off to, yeah.
I can. It's super easy. It's all of my social media, and the website is the full Forever Yours Legacy Videos. So the website is foreveryours.legacyvideos.com. Instagram is Forever Yours Legacy Videos, and you'll see a picture of me in a pink blouse up the top.
Yes, I
And
do see that, yeah.
same thing with my Facebook page, Forever Yours Legacy Videos. And so, and if people already happen to follow my personal accounts, which Kerry Sayers Doucet, DOU. Oh, thank you.
Yep, there it
That's
is.
it. Yep. So DOUCET, Kerry Sayers Doucet is how I'm listed on Facebook, and then I'm KSay21 on Insta. Those are my personal accounts, and I'm trying to link a lot of my business, from my personal accounts to my business
And I have
accounts.
to
So
tell you,
like,
Kerry,
follow.
what's popular with you, believe it or not, I mean, and some of your old buddies in the sporting world, LinkedIn is a very popular
Right.
spot with you. I mean,
Yes.
lot of great compliments coming your way, and a lot of congratulatory things. By the way, I don't want to leave them out. Matthew Doucet, has he been in your corner with this? You're wonderful.
Matthew Doucet, the husband. Yep, he's the hubby.
Yeah,
He's been a source of support and financial support as well at times.
great.
You know, I left my job in October, and while I still do events, as you know, when you're starting a business, there's a lot of money that is invested in doing it. And this money has literally only been invested in my stories. I don't have employees. I use freelancers. And so I've found some amazing editors and some amazing videographers. And it was important for me to start off on the right note and make sure that, you know, I had good quality video and editing coming in. And so he's been incredibly supportive, and,
Great, great. I didn't want
you
to leave
know,
Matt. I didn't want to leave Matt out of the podcast.
he'll appreciate that you brought his name up. No,
And tell him I said hello. Yeah, for
I
sure.
will for sure. Thank
But
you.
okay, I'm gonna leave it with, I got to do some 5 questions thing. I
All
do
right.
5 question thing, so we'll have a little fun. But again, this is fantastic. Are you still following a little bit of sports? Just once in a while. Do you follow? Do you?
For sure. Yep.
Okay,
Well, my
so
husband's a big sports fan too. So ultimately,
yes.
every night we're seated in front of a, you know, TV doing work of some sort. And so, yes,
And you
we're
know, Kier,
still
who's got time to watch sports? I mean, I'm always like catching maybe the last inning or trying to find out
right.
if Eloy Jimenez is on the disabled list. But anyway, okay. I've never asked you this. But question one: Sox or Cubs? Since you're out of the sports thing, you're not the sportscaster anymore.
So I will just say this, that I love both the North and South Siders, so no one gets on me, but I was born and mostly worked in American League towns. And of
Okay.
course, when I first started with Comcast Sportsnet many moons ago, um, we had the Cubs, White Sox, Bulls, and wait,
Yes.
what was it? Bulls and Cubs, yeah,
Blackhawks.
White Sox, Bulls, and Blackhawks on our air. And I was one of the White Sox beat reporters and got to be, you know, part of that World Series coverage team. So, and really covering that team with Ozzy and Paulie and,
Brzezinski.
I mean, Podsednik and all that
Good
whole crew.
bunch.
It's just really hard. I'll never forget that season. I mean, a lot of people won't, but just the
Yeah.
personalities and Ozzy and all of it. So American League has definitely more been what I've covered, but there's so much to love about the Cubs, especially now again.
Okay, so it's
Not
a 50.
necessarily this year,
I'm
but
gonna
now
lean
that
more that
they
you
won
said.
World Series, what I mean.
Yeah, I'm gonna lean more that you said Sox because your buddy here is Sox, so just so you know. Okay, all-time favorite interview that you interviewed when you were doing the sports. Your all-time favorite interview where you can go back and say, wow, that was a good interview, like you're doing the legacy when it's flowing.
So my all-time favorite person to interview goes way, way back, and this is not even a Chicago-based.
Okay.
It was literally when I was just early in the business and I was working out of Detroit, my hometown, Chris Spielman.
Oh,
And
yes.
it pains me to say because of where he went to college, but he was with the Lions at the time and he was the best interview ever all the time. No matter whether he had a good or a bad game, whether they won or lost, he would always give the media respect. He would always take the time to not be angry and to not answer in anger or lash out. And he ended up, his wife at the time ended up with cancer and he left the sport to take care of her. And so there were so many things about him as both an athlete and the way he played the game and as a person that I respected. So who I used to have the most fun interviewing out here, and there were two, and they were both Southsiders, was AJ Pierzynski
Oh, God.
and Roger Bossard. I mean,
Oh, the grounds crew.
I had I had some of the most amazing and hilarious interviews with the Sodfather, Rain Delay Theater. Oh my gosh, Roger. I mean, I could barely, I would be breaking up so much and cracking up so much I could barely speak sometimes when he'd start talking about his big Doppler and
Oh, wow. I can imagine. I can imagine. Yeah, because
he was great.
the greatest
But,
grounds crew guy in the world. All right, question.
and then when I worked for Fox, I had to interview AJ a lot and he just would take anything and run with it. And he was so cocky and just,
Yeah,
I
he had that
loved
arrogance about
him.
him. He had that arrogance.
He did, but in a funny way.
Yeah.
Like I never took it in a bad way with him. You just knew. And I loved that he was like, he loved playing the villain. So
Yeah.
like, again, you love him if he's on your team and you despise him if he's not.
Right. I'm sure Michael Barrett's got a broken jaw from when he hit him. Oh my God. Your favorite song to dance to when it comes on, even if you're just sitting at the table. What's your favorite song?
Oh, geez.
Yeah, something that just gets you in the mood to move.
Okay, so I just saw a clip of it randomly today, and I don't even remember where I saw it, probably randomly scrolling social media. I'm not even gonna come up with the name. My kids will kill me. It's the one that's got the whipped cream, and I got two straws. One, I don't know.
Okay, one of those. Yeah,
Bougie like it's like a country song that's got and oh man, I'm gonna hate myself because I can't remember it. But
remember, it's gonna go on YouTube. It'll go viral.
Great. They'll know how old I am because I can't remember the name of the song, but it's a country song and it's got like a really cute dance and it's the singer with his daughter. They do it all the time and they've done it in a million places. And it was really popular during the pandemic. And I swear my kids and I picked it up to learn it like 5 times over like 6 months and we got like parts of it.
I'll have to ask my son Vince. He's a big country guy.
Bougie, like I can't even remember what it was. Like there's a really simple.
Okay, question 4.
Yes.
Favorite restaurant to go with Mr. Matthew Doucet.
Okay, so the restaurant I like or the restaurant?
No, the restaurant you're hoping he's taking you to. Yeah.
So that's a really tough one. I mean, we love the Boca Group in the city. I know, at least I used to know Rob and his partner back in the day, Rob Katz, and they were just amazing to be around, and they've been so successful, and everything they have opened is like basically touched. It's like they've touched it and it turns to gold. So I would definitely say any of the Boca Group restaurants in the city. Out here in Elmhurst, where we live, we like Positive Pizza.
Of course, yep. Way to go, girl.
And 100 South, one of my
100
husband's
South,
clients.
yeah.
That's the only place they want to go, and so we like the atmosphere there. I take that back too. There's another one called Victory that's in Elmhurst. That's it's hopping all the time.
Right. And a great breakfast place in Elmhurst. I mean, I asked you.
Which one?
Stray Hen.
Of course, Stray Hen's amazing.
Great breakfast place. Okay, so here's it. So you have done. This is the last one. You're 5 for 5 on all of these, even though you didn't into that Cub Sox one. But here's the best one. Your favorite podcast to be on. Who's your favorite podcast?
I mean, this one. How am I supposed to answer that without getting heavily
Uh,
criticized later. People who
yeah.
throw shade on me for a while. This one, of
Okay.
course. I mean,
Carrie,
for you to call me back again, that's really meaning. No,
oh,
it really
thank you,
is
Carrie.
meaningful.
Carrie
And
Sayers, you keep doing what you're doing because this is tremendous. Again, forever yours, Legacy Videos, the president and founder. Fantastic, a great career. If this is Sayers part 3, it's a great part 3, my lady.
Sayers 3.0. Hopefully, I don't know if there's going to be a 4.0, but 3.0 is where it's at right now.
You got it. You got it. Continued success, and really thanks for coming on.
Thanks, John. Great to see you, and thank you for reaching out.
You got it, Kier. All right, we'll talk soon.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.